It's great to see so many of you here. It's been a real buzz. And if you're using social media, can you use the hashtag #BetterPeace? That's the hashtag we're using for this event, so we can kind of aggregate the kind of activity we have. I'm going to introduce a guy called Rob Heron. A company called EY have very kindly sponsored the event today. The bit you're probably most grateful for is they paid for the hoodies that you're all going to get on your way out. But it's actually really nice for us to be able to work with a company who has a strong social conscience and is interested in the kind of work we're doing. And really, we couldn't have done all the things that we've done today without their support. So thank you, Rob, and you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Paul, and it's been a pleasure to work with you in the Politics in Action team over the past few weeks. So good afternoon, everyone. It's EY's real privilege to support Politics in Action for this very special Young Voices event. The first question you have in your mind is, how long is this man going to talk for? Okay, I'm going to be here for less than 5 minutes, so please give me your attention. Thank you for the opportunity to welcome and speak to everybody today. I wanted to start by saying that I was at the showcase earlier today, and I was truly inspired, but not surprised, by the world-class talent we have in this room. I really enjoyed hearing the thought-provoking insights you have on really, really complex issues, such as how could we improve the Good Friday Agreement? What about the cost of living crisis and mental health as well? So some really, really important subjects, so thank you for that. It really has been an incredible few weeks for our country, and I hope you've all really enjoyed it. As we've come together to not only reflect and celebrate the Good Friday Agreement, but just as important, look forward for the next 25 years. I was lucky to be here yesterday, as I'll talk about yesterday in a bit as well, but this morning has been the highlight of the event for me so far, so thank you. Today's theme is, what does peace mean to me? And that's actually caused me to reflect on what peace actually means for me as an individual. And put really simply, peace means that I've been able to build a life and a career in a country that I love. I'm from a small village called Calinchi in County Down, and this is a bit of a personal story. And there are a couple of links to people in the room, which is really quite nice. I studied at Regent House, as did at least one other person here as well, and then I studied here at Queen's. Whenever I graduated, which was more than 25 years ago, despite the fact I loved this country, I loved Northern Ireland, I felt there were better opportunities for me beyond these shores. So I made the difficult decision to leave home. It was actually quite common at that time, and both my siblings left home as well. And interestingly, neither of them have returned. But when I was away, the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and after probably a number of false dawns for us who are old enough in the room to remember, this felt like something different. And then as the momentum built around it, and the opportunity, the stability that that brought, coming back home became a real possibility for me. So after 10 years of being in England and then having the great pleasure of travelling around the world, I came back home. My wife and I settled in Calinchi again, and I'm really pleased to say Matthew, our son, and Eva, our daughter, who are both at Methody across the road, and it was great to meet some of the Methody students and teachers today. They're settled there as well, and I've been able to build a career, a fulfilling career in Northern Ireland with EY. Without peace, I'm really not sure that this would have been possible. Today, I'm really proud to be managing partner for EY here in Northern Ireland. Based on the conversations today, many of you don't know much about EY, okay? We're a global leader in professional services. We operate in over 150 different markets around the world. More locally, we operate on an all-island basis, and that's really important to us. And Frank O'Keefe is at the back of the room. He's our managing partner for all of Ireland, while I'm Northern Ireland. And that's a sign of how important the Good Friday Agreement is to us, because we do operate on an all-island basis. We've over 5,500 employees here on the island, and 850 of those are here in Belfast, and we have plans to grow that significantly. Our purpose in EY is to build a better working world. And what does that mean? We do that by advising businesses, government, enterprises, etc., as they grow, create value, and transform themselves. A couple of examples of businesses we work with. One of them is called TextHelp. You may or may not have heard of it. It's based in Antrim. It is a world leader in assistive technology to help those who have reading and writing difficulties such as dyslexia. It's a world-leading company based here in Antrim, and very few people know about it. Sarah is in the front seat here, and you'll hear from her later on a panel. We've also got a mutual friend who has set up one of the most exciting startup businesses in circular fashion and streetwear fashion there is in the world. The business is called Responsible. The founder is Mark Dowdge. We work really closely with him. Again, that business is here in Northern Ireland. That's the type of businesses we work with. As I mentioned, we have huge growth plans for EY in Northern Ireland and across the island. This year, we're going to employ more than 500 graduates and school leavers. It would be great to think there would be some of the amazing talent in this room would join the amazing team that we have at EY. Here in Northern Ireland, we plan to grow the business from 850 people to more than 2,000 people. And we employ people from a diverse range of backgrounds and talents, etc., and that's what makes us such a rich organisation. Frank and myself and Colin, who's in the room as well, Claire and Judith, who's in the panel you'll hear from, we're really passionate about this, because what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to create the opportunities for people that they don't feel they need to leave Northern Ireland. Some people will want to, and it's very positive, and you'll hear from Sarah later. She's gone off and built her career outside of Northern Ireland, and it's a great experience, but actually it can be a fabulous experience to be back here in Northern Ireland as well. What we've been hearing over the past few days is that great leadership, partnership and courage is what was required to get to an agreement on the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago. I've just met in person, actually, Senator George Mitchell, who gave an address yesterday, which was probably the most powerful and emotional address that I have ever witnessed in person. And there was one quote that really stood out from me, that what Mr. Mitchell said yesterday was, "The future becomes the present in a heartbeat." And it's so true. I cannot believe it's 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and the next 25 years is going to pass really quickly as well. From what I've experienced today, you're already providing great leadership. I would both encourage you and ask you to continue with that leadership wherever your career might take you. I would ask each and every one of your room to think about what will be the legacy that you want to create for Northern Ireland and beyond. Thank you. Enjoy your day. You have a brilliant panel of speakers here. Good luck in your life journey. And if I can personally be of any assistance to you, please do feel free to contact me. Thank you.
My name is Aoife, and I'm on the board of Politics in Action. I just want to talk to you a bit about our rebranding, and I'm going to introduce some students to come up and tell you a bit more about it. But over the past year, it's been incredibly busy at Politics in Action, and there's been loads of work going on in the background to make sure that we're really engaging with you all as best as we can and really strengthening it as a platform. So as part of this building work, we decided to go through a rebranding process, which involved really focusing on our mission, values, and ethos as an organisation, and making sure that this was reflected in our outward-facing image. So as well as myself and other Politics in Action staff, we had young people from schools across Northern Ireland to help us with this process, and those perspectives were really invaluable. We couldn't have done it without them. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the three students that went through the process with us, and that's Ellie, Sam, and QUB.
Hi, my name is Ellie, and I was part of the Politics in Action rebranding process with Darkside, where we attended regular Zoom call sessions to establish the core elements of Politics in Action. To do this, we completed a set of exercises addressing the purpose, vision, mission, and core values Politics in Action holds. I enjoyed attending these sessions, as we were able to discuss with a group of engaged young people, what do we want to see from Politics in Action? As a young person, it was very insightful and interesting to see how a brand is developed and how intricate and personal the process is. Working with Darkside, we completed exercises where we were given questions and we had to answer with a short 1 or 2 word answers. To establish a purpose, for example, we asked ourselves, who are we helping? young people, teachers, what problems are we solving? Improve political understanding? After establishing these simple answers, we then went on to ask, how? How do we help young people? How are we solving problems? It was interesting to see how, with processes such as this, you begin with simple ideas, a few key words or core values, and then expand and build upon them. By the end of the exercise, we were able to confidently say that Politics in Action supports young people by amplifying their voices and collaborating with politicians. We help them develop key communication and life skills and make young people feel empowered.
Hi, my name is QUB, and I help with the Politics in Action rebranding process. So the team and I decided to make a character profile aimed towards our targeted demographic, teenagers. We created an avatar, James, in which we embedded him with goals, aspirations, a family life, and we spoke on issues surrounding his day-to-day life. We felt this was a vital step in our rebranding process, as it has enabled us to stay on the same page when conversing with one another. This part of the process was not only helpful on giving us insight on what a team wished to achieve, but allowed us to come out of our bubbles speaking more freely, exactly what Politics in Action is all about. So, what is Politics in Action? We at Politics in Action are kind, knowledgeable, and supportive. We believe in helping youth every step of the way, and our courses are geared towards helping young people in their political journeys. We develop communication skills and impart knowledge that is essential and transferable in different aspects of life. An important lesson we are determined to pass on to younger generations is the ability to maintain a mutual respect for one another, even when our opinions don't align. We bolster kindness in the discourse between youth and politicians. We promote a culture containing conversations, understanding that the ultimate goal is not always having a final word. Our vision is to create a world where children and young people involved in finding solutions to issues that impact on their lives, the lives of their peers, and even the lives of those in the wider world, creating a tight-knit community between youth and with similar goals and aspirations. But I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times. So what makes us different? We are trying to build a future in which young people are equitable stakeholders in global decision-making, defining our generation as those who rose above hatred and separation, using currencies such as respect, equity, and agency to achieve such feats. As challenging as this may sound, Politics in Action has given us the tools and knowledge to make this dream a reality. If you give Politics in Action the chance to educate you, it will fuel your passion and love for learning, giving you the energy to put one foot in front of the other, starting with a walk, lead into a jog, and finally to a full-blown sprint to the finishing line, where we'll be able to create a brighter future for our kids, grandkids, and generations to come. And I'll end with the quote. I once heard a great man say, either we heal now as a team or crumble as individuals in the face of uncertainty. And I, for one, am a team player.
Hello, my name is Samuel, and I was involved in the rebranding process. We all agreed that the brand's main goal is to get young people more interested in politics and wanting to participate in political events and develop their views of politics as a whole. We want to revolutionize politics by making young people more involved in political decisions. As a young person, some of us feel like politics is something that doesn't directly affect us. But the truth is, politics influences us in every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to education to climate change and everything in between. That is why Politics in Action rebranded, to make politics more appealing and accessible to young people. Like in our logo. Our logo is nice and simplistic and is made to look like a speech bubble to show that we want to talk and listen to young people's views. The decisions made by our elected officials have made a massive impact on the world we live in, and is the future we will inherit. That's exactly why young people should participate more in politics, by getting involved in the political process. That's where Politics in Action gets involved. We act as a bridge to bring young people and politicians together to achieve a common goal, because we have the power to shape the future we want to see. Whether you're a volunteer for a political campaign, attend a political rally, or vote in an election, your voice matters. Furthermore, statistics show that young people are the largest voting bloc in the world. Imagine the power we could wield if we all showed up to the polls and made our voices heard. Finally, participation in politics is a great way to become more informed about important issues and gain a deeper understanding of the world around us. We can have a direct impact on policies that are important to us, and it's never too early to start engaging in the political process. So, if you want to make a difference in the world and have your voice heard, participating in politics is essential. Don't let others make decisions for you. Take control of your own future and become an active participant in the political process. Together we can create the world we want to see. Thank you.
So we're going to move on now to our first panel of the afternoon. So I'd like to welcome the panelists for the first session to the stage, please. And thank you all for coming. I hope you really enjoy it. On one final panelist who will join us later. But for now, I want to warmly welcome all three of you for coming. Thank you so much. As you all know, we're here to mark the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and reflect on the role of the agreement in our ongoing peace process here in Northern Ireland. If, like me, you weren't around at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, through no fault of your own, of course, you've probably grown up hearing stories from your parents, family members, teachers, and friends about different experiences during the conflict and what the agreement really meant to everyone at the time. The agreement might have been signed in 1998, but it didn't just impact the lives of those who were around at the time. It has impacted the lives of everyone who has come since then, including all of us here today, because it lay the foundations of peace that allowed many of us to grow up in a society that was relatively violence-free, something that seemed close to impossible for those that were there 25 years ago. So the theme for today's events across Queen's is Renew, and it's all about how we can fulfil the promise of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement for all of us here, but also for generations to come. This panel in particular is an opportunity for us to talk about experiences and expectations of peace in Northern Ireland and share perspectives and learning between generations. In particular, today we want to shine a light on the role of women in promoting and building peace in communities, as their role has often been sidelined or overlooked in traditional accounts of the conflict, despite being central to achieving the peace that we currently have here in Northern Ireland. As I mentioned, my name is Aoife Mallon, and I'm a policy and research assistant for a women's sector organisation called the Women's Resource and Development Agency. I'm also a trustee at Politics in Action, and my background is in human rights with a specialty in gender equality, which I studied at university. By chance, I was born the year of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and like many of you here, I didn't experience the conflict, but I grew up in the post-conflict society here in Northern Ireland. It's an absolute privilege and honour to introduce this panel to speak to you today on the topic of what peace means to me. So I'm going to just introduce you all from my left onwards. Firstly, our first panelist is Ambassador Katrina Fodovat, who is a senior official to the US Secretary of State and acting ambassador at large in the Office of Global Women's Issues. In this role, Katrina leads a team of gender experts promoting gender equality efforts, including support of women, peace and security, countering violent extremism, promoting women's economic empowerment, and combating gender-based violence. Katrina also has a background working in transitional justice and peace negotiations in countries such as Iraq, Kosovo, and Sri Lanka. Secondly, we have Sarah Fryer, originally from Sion Mills in Northern Ireland and CEO at Nextdoor, which is an app aimed at bringing communities together by providing an online discussion space for neighbours. Sarah is also a co-founder of Ladies Who Launch, an initiative to support women and non-binary small business owners and entrepreneurs across the world, and is also former CFO at the US tech company Square. Finally, we have Judith Savage, our third panelist, who is a consulting partner at EY, where she leads their business consulting practice in Northern Ireland and works closely with local and central government. Judith has done a lot of work encouraging young people into business through non-traditional routes, with a particular focus on the inclusion of underrepresented groups. Thank you all for being here. Just before we get started, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping things. So as you'll know, the event is being live streamed and recorded, and there will be photographs taken throughout the session. The first half of the panel is where we'll hear directly from our panelists, and then we'll open up the conversation to all of you in the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, we would love to hear from you. So just please raise your hand and you'll get a mic, and you can present your question to the panelists. Finally, just to mention, we have a very diverse audience here today with people from different backgrounds and communities, and I'd ask that the discussions and contributions are respectful of the views of others so we can have a constructive and open conversation for the benefit of everyone. And as Paul mentioned, if you'd like to tweet about the event, please use the hashtag #BetterPeace. So the focus of today is what peace means to me. And the reason for this panel discussion is to provide you, as young people, the opportunity to learn from the panelists, but also so the panelists can learn from you about the issues that you care about, what you're learning in school, and what you feel passionately about. So we really want to have that opportunity it's a shared experience rather than being lectured, because I know that you spend all week in classes. So yes, in the second half of the panel, we'll encourage you to ask questions on any topics that matter to you as a young person in terms of your experiences and your expectations of peace in Northern Ireland. We have here today a panel of individuals who have all in their own way contributed to creating a better future for people in Northern Ireland and beyond. The panel includes expertise and experience promoting women's role in peace building, business and leadership, and improving opportunities for people in post-conflict societies. So we're going to start today with the question, what does peace mean to you? And we'll give a chance for all of our panelists to answer the question. So we'll start with you, Ambassador Fodovat. What does peace mean to you?
Well, excellent question. Thanks so much. First, I want to say thank you to Politics in Action, Queen's University, and EY, and to all of the amazing students here today. I hope you all really recognize just how incredible it is to have this opportunity and for your interest in what's going on and making sure that we are all taking the opportunity to learn from each other. So thank you all for being here today. It's such an honor to be with you all. So what does peace mean to me? You know, yesterday I was quite moved by Senator Mitchell's comments around his role in the agreement. And one of the things that he brought up was, the agreement was taking a long time to come together, and his wife had a child. And it's one of those moments when we talk about, when you're talking about violent extremism, or when you talk about peace negotiations or war or conflict, or even engaging in negotiations of any kind, especially with men, one of the interesting points is when they first have a child, when anyone first has a child, you all should know how precious all of you are to your parents. That is a life-changing moment. And he talked about, he wanted to make sure that he stayed for all the children of Northern Ireland that were to come after that agreement. So it was very important to him. And at that moment, it brought me back to one of the first experiences I had in peace negotiations. So there are these accords called the Wye River Accords that President Clinton, who obviously is a peace builder, had tried to negotiate with the Palestinians and Israelis. And we had 20 projects, actually, that I got to work on that were joint between Palestinians and Israelis. And I had gone out there, literally, I had just had my own son. He was 3 months old. I went to Israel, and there were several projects. Some of them were museums that they were building together. Some of them were environmental projects, but there was one project in particular, and I remember. And when you ask, what does peace mean to me, I always think it's somebody that doesn't have peace is the best person to be able to define this. And so there was this organization called Parent Circle. And the Parent Circle was an organization that had parents that had lost children to one side or the other. And in the name of their children who had died, they were going to stop the violence. And that was a grace that I remember, and I just cried and couldn't even open my eyes to see what these women and parents were saying about this, because it was just such a momentous moment to see, in the name of peace and in the name of making sure violence stopped, even though they had lost the most precious thing to them, they were going to promote peace. So to me, and I should also give just a little bit of background on myself. I was actually born in Iran. I'm an Iranian American, and my family came to the United States during the revolution. So I don't know if anyone really knows what's going on in Iran right now, but in terms of women's rights, it's not exactly the best place to be. And so, there is a lot of violence against women, and certainly the rights are being taken away from women in Iran. And so I'm very lucky to be in the United States where I have those rights. So when I talk about peace and justice, that is a very personal thing for everyone. They talk about the arc of history points towards justice, but it doesn't point that way without effort and hard work and dedication and hope. And so you all of you sitting here, all of you young people are that hope for peace. So this has been very moving, and I am so honored to be here, to see just what's been accomplished over the last 25 years and just the hope going forward for a lasting peace. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think you're right. You've pulled on that thing of peace is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process, and it's ongoing efforts from everyone. And I'm sure we'll come back to that later in the discussion. Sarah, can I turn to you? What does peace mean to you?
So as was said, just first of all, thank you. Thank to everyone who's sponsoring it, but thank you all. I am the mother of teenagers. And so I know it's a lot to ask to sit in a room like this and listen to a bunch of adults drone on, but hopefully you'll learn a lot and take something away today. That's actually the big thing that I hope for everyone in the room. You go away and think about it. What peace means to me, so in 1998, I actually had already left Northern Ireland. So I grew up in Sion Mills, went to Strabane Grammar School, but I'd gone to university over in England. And then I had made my way, ended up working for an American firm in South Africa. So I'd kind of seen this other side of apartheid ending and what that meant there. And I used to drive home from my study every night listening to the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, I think it was the TRC. And it was really an amazing thing to listen to when you came from the background of Northern Ireland. So if I think about what peace meant up to that point, it meant someone not knocking on your door and saying, you all have to get out because there's a bomb at the police barracks. It meant not driving in the bus up to school, which was like about a 5-minute drive because I was Protestant. The school went through a very Catholic area and our buses would get stoned all the time, which is kind of all sorts of bonkers. I remember one of our friends left his PE kit outside the Ulster Bank in Strabane, and later that night on the TV there was a controlled explosion of said PE kit. That poor boy never recovered from that story, but it's the kind of madness of growing up with the Troubles. So their peace was no longer hearing about those things, thinking about those things. 1998 was amazing because of the Good Friday Agreement, why we're all here, but it was also the year of the Oma bombing. And I remember vividly calling home, it brings tears to my eyes today, because that's where my family all was, and wanting to know, had anyone died? And actually one of the boys I went to school with, so someone just like you sitting next to me at an event like this, did not make it out of that. And so peace was the ending of all of that. Peace today, to me, is I want to be able to talk to people about Northern Ireland and have them not say, what was it like to grow up in the Troubles, but rather to say, wow, how did Northern Ireland become such an economic miracle? We have such an amazing moment in time. And I love that you said peace is not a moment, it's a journey. We've been on a journey for 25 years. But we have a moment right now, from an economic perspective, to really do something extraordinary in this country. And it makes me so excited for all of you, because it will mean that you don't need to make that choice that Rob talked about at the beginning of potentially having to leave. I felt like I had to leave to go find more of the prosperity that I was seeking, more of the entrepreneurship that I was seeking. And I want you not to have to make that choice if you don't want to. I also want you to fly and go great places if you want to go try different experiences, but I want you not to feel like there isn't that choice. And so peace today to me is I want to have people stop me and say, oh, you're Northern Irish? What did you all do to cause that amazing economic miracle to happen? So that's kind of where I would like to see it go to.
Just on that, Sarah, do you see that that's starting to happen? Have you seen those conversations changing over time?
I think they are. I actually often compare, maybe rightly or wrongly, I think about Singapore. I was in Singapore right at the end of COVID. It was like the first trip I took where I finally kind of left the country. And when you live in the US, sometimes you really need to leave the US as well. It has its own bonkers thing going on a lot of the time. But I went to Singapore, and Singapore is an economic miracle, right? And it sits in this really extraordinary camp of like very close to China, very close to everything going on in Asia, but also deemed extremely kind of Western. And so you go and it's all big high rises and so on. It's not that I want to see Northern Ireland become a land of big high-rises. The beauty of Northern Ireland is the green when you fly in. But I do think that there is finally this ability to have a foot in the UK, which is a massive market. Someone who's a business person, the UK is our second largest market for next door. It's a really interesting market for us to monetize in. It's a population of, UK population is about 65 million, I think. That's a lot of people to sell stuff to. At the same time, to be able to keep a foot in Europe is incredible as well, particularly in an English-speaking country that's highly educated, but also has this strong sense of community. Like, anyone I ever talked to that puts a business footprint in Northern Ireland always says, oh my God, they're the nicest people on the planet. And you always want to work with the nicest people on the planet. So I think that is unique. What I've seen is the startup culture is very real. I'm an investor, an early co-founder in the Ormo Baths. I've seen amazing companies. Rob talked about Responsible, great entrepreneur, Mark Dowds. I'm an investor in companies like Cloudsmith, which raised the largest Series A of any company here on the island of Ireland. Investor in companies like Medal, Hurry, the list goes on, because I do see entrepreneurship starting to really thrive. And again, it comes back to a very unique economic position, if we don't squander it, a really highly educated workforce of people who have incredible work ethic and integrity, and people you just want to be around.
And those are some of the positives of peace. Thank you for that, Sarah. Judith, coming to you, what does peace mean to you?
Thanks, Aoife, and hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today. It's a really difficult question, but when I was reflecting on this and casting my mind back 25 years, I was 18 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, similar to many of you in the room today, and at a really pivotal stage in my life. And for me, peace has really given me choice. So my elder siblings, similar to Rob's, both left Northern Ireland, pursued careers elsewhere, have never returned. But for me, when I saw the Good Friday Agreement being signed and the opportunity that that would bring to Northern Ireland, I decided to stay. And I have built a career and a life in Northern Ireland that I love. With a firm that I love, when I think back 25 years ago, the EYs just didn't exist in Belfast. You know, there wasn't the investment and the opportunity to actually work for an international company, travel all over the world, but actually base yourself at home. And being able to base myself at home meant I had that family support to really build a life here. I'm very fortunate to have two children and to be able to balance that with being a partner in EY and juggling the demands that that brings. But I guess most importantly for me, when I think of my kids and their friends, to know that they're growing up in a society that is diverse, that is prosperous, and most importantly, that is safe, is a real comfort to me, and that gives me huge optimism for the future.
Yeah, we have lots of optimism on the panel so far, which is great. The next question that I want to put to the panel is actually a question that came from one of the schools who are attending today. So this is a question from Assumption. And the question that came through was, what advice would each of you give your 17-year-old self about how to become a successful female leader?
Well, I have a 17-year-old son, and so sometimes I try and give him advice that I would give to myself, and he always likes to talk to me in hashtags. So I often talk back to him in hashtags, and you know, then he kind of rolls his eyes and he's like, "You're so not cool," but I'm like, hashtag cool mom. So you know, I think the advice I would give to myself, and something I always tell him is, and I lean into the hashtags, I always tell him, you know, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go after your passion. So he's 17 years old, and much to the chagrin of his mother, he already has his pilot's license. He found opportunities to fly planes and flew planes all last year. And as a mother, you can imagine, you don't want your son, he got his pilot's license before he got his driver's license. So I would say lean into, find your passion, look for those opportunities. Whenever anybody asks you within that scope, to do, volunteer for anything, raise your hand, say, I'll do it. People might get jealous. People used to get so mad. I'm still like this now. I will still volunteer for anything, even though I'm an ambassador. I will, and my team will tell you, please stop volunteering us for everything. But lean into it, find those opportunities. You will find mentors. You will find people that will, we just heard from a bunch of panelists that used to be Hillary Clinton's interns. You know how many interns I hire? I hire a lot of interns because those are the people that have proven themselves to you. They have, you've watched them, you've helped them grow in their careers. So find your passion, find your mentors, and then when you get a seat at the table, have sharp elbows and help other people get to that table too. So that would be what I would tell to my 17-year-old #coolmom self.
I think that's a good point, because it's really hard to know whenever you're in school. You've got so many subjects to study, your brain is being pulled in all these different directions, and it can sometimes feel hard to be able to plan what you want to do at such a young age and what course you want to do. So it's like trusting those instincts of what am I interested in, what do I care about, and just seeing what doors open along the way. Sarah, what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self about becoming a successful female leader?
So first of all, I'd say a successful leader. Don't box yourself into there being a female leader. They're traits, but just leader, right? 50-50, the way the world should be. Two things that really stand out to me. The first is actually at 17, that to tell myself you don't have to be perfect. And that actually does, I think, tend a little towards gender. I think women, girls, are often expected to do everything perfectly. I was definitely the kid that would come home, and if I got 99 out of 100, my dad would ask me about the one. I'm like, what about the 99? And I didn't even notice it was happening, but it was happening a lot. And I love my dad to bits, but definitely something I notice now. The second, with boys, I think there's much more celebration of the scrappiness. And I'm the mom of an older girl, younger boy, and I see that too in myself, and I have to catch myself doing it to make sure that I'm not leading my girl in particular into a path of perfectionism, because it needs to be messy and you should make mistakes. And frankly, if you're not, I don't know if any of you, I learned to ski when I was in my 20s, and I get to live in a part of the world where it's fun. We can go skiing at the weekend. And the thing I've learned with skiing is if you don't fall down at least a couple of times a day when you're skiing, you're actually not skiing hard enough. That means you're not pushing yourself. So same should be true in everything you're doing. If you're not falling down once or twice, maybe it's not every day, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. So that's number one, would be perfectionism. Stay away from it. It's not good for you. And the second is curiosity. So be really curious. Try everything. Right now, there's great technology coming on the scene, right? We're in a world of AI. I hope, has everyone in the room, who hasn't tried, no, I'm going to say who has tried ChatGPT? Okay, so I actually see I would expect the whole room to have their hands up right now. Like if I were in Silicon Valley, back home, and was in a high school and asked that same question, everybody would have their hand up. If I was in China, everyone definitely would have their hand up. And that's who you're going to be competing with. So stay curious, try everything. Doesn't mean you're cheating at school. Like, don't write your essays using ChatGPT. Your teachers will find you out. However, I do think it's kind of like if we went back to, I think Google was founded in 1998, and I asked you all, have you tried search? If I asked you all, like, who's done a Google search in their life? Dear God, no one put up their hand to say you have not. But I feel it's going to be the same way with something like AI. So please be really, really curious and try not to box yourself in. The thing I find when I come home to Northern Ireland and I talk to groups that are your age, and I always ask, where are you thinking about going to university? Or what are you thinking of studying? And what do you think you might want to do? there's still this tendency in Northern Ireland towards like the great professions. You got to be a doctor. My brother's a doctor. An accountant or a lawyer, right? Those are always the three I hear, unless you grew up where I grew up, and then you could be a farmer as well. I say that because not all of you think that way or do that way, and if you do those professions, they are beautiful things to do. Do them because you're passionate, but do them also because you considered a whole range of other things, and that became the thing that you got driven towards. So try not to narrow yourself at the moment. Try to really expand your horizons. Think a lot bigger. I'm a huge proponent now. I have kids your age thinking about university. I actually love the American system where you don't even declare a major. You don't even declare what you're going to go study until the end of your second year of a 4-year degree. Versus we narrow our kids at 16 and then at 18 into like only studying 3 or 4 subjects and then taking that and going to university and studying that exact same thing. You can't really totally fight the system, but you can fight the system to some degree. So don't go for perfect and stay curious.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Judith, what advice would you give?
So every year in EY, we take in quite a sizable group of graduates, and I always tell them the same 3 pieces of advice. And for me, number 1 is be yourself, be authentic. Sometimes when you're in a room or you're with a group of people, you feel you have to be a certain way, but actually you don't. Everybody is unique and brings their own strengths, and you can truly be yourself if you feel that you're accepted as you are. So I always encourage people to just be themselves and be their best selves, using what they have around them to do that. I think secondly is find your mentors. So, there are the formal mentors that you get at different stages of your life, but actually those informal mentoring relationships of being able to have somebody that has your back emotionally through the various stages of your career and your life is really important. And I'm really fortunate to have had quite a number of mentors over the years that have come and gone, but just having a sounding board that you can really be yourself and test your thoughts and ideas with and get emotional support from is important. And my third piece of advice is really around your network. If you look around the room today, everybody in this room is going to be a future leader. It's not too early to start to build those relationships because people follow people. And certainly in our business, we're all about people. So always challenge yourself to get to know people with different viewpoints, with different backgrounds, who think differently to yourself, and just build those networks, but keep them going over the years because you never know when your paths will cross again. So those are really the 3 pieces of advice I would give. Be yourself, get a good mentor or lots of good mentors, and build your network.
Thank you so much. And just on your last point that you made there about coming together, no matter what your background is, and bringing that back to the agreement, that the agreement would not have been signed if it weren't for the fact that people came from all corners of the community to work together in the interest of achieving peace for everyone. So thank you for that, for the whole panel. We're going to open it up now to all of you, and hopefully you'll have some questions ready. What we're going to do is we'll have 2 roving mics that will move up. There's Clara up the top with the big pink one, and then on this side we'll have another one. Yep. And they're going to move up and down. So if you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand and just wait until you've got the microphone before you speak so that we can make sure that we hear you. And if you start by just telling us your name and which school you're from, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Agna and I go to St. Patrick's Academy in Lisburn, and I'm with the Student Union today, so yeah. But my question is about confidence and kind of being a woman leader. Like, have you always been confident, and do you have any advice for women in the room who want to go into leadership and just want to build a little confidence doing that?
Yeah, we might start at this end of the panel and then work down if that's okay. Judith, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Olga. I think partly confidence comes with being comfortable in your own skin. So that point I made about being authentic and being yourself, once you feel accepted, that gives you a level of confidence because you understand that you have your strengths and you have that self-awareness. I would also encourage people to really stretch themselves and to seek out stretch opportunities. Not everybody likes speaking in public, for example. But once you do it, you start to, develop a confidence when you do stretch yourself beyond your own capabilities. Don't know if that answers your question, but...
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to come in on that?
Absolutely. So on the confidence side, so number one thing I think a lot about is getting an adrenaline rush every day. It's like my skiing analogy. So I actually think you should try to get an adrenaline rush every day. Do something that actually scares you enough. You feel that, like however you experience adrenaline, for me it's like a prickly feeling. My brother is an HDU doctor. You don't want to ever go see him, because if you go to the ER and they can't figure you out, they send you to him and you might not make it. But the last thing they do, if you're really on the edge, they'll give you a shot of adrenaline. And so I always think of it as actually a gift that I'm getting that shot of adrenaline. So I kind of try to bask in it instead of fearing it. So I actually kind of like public speaking, because even to this day, I always get a little moment of like the tingle of like, oh my God, I have to speak in front of these other people. The other thing mentally in my head if I'm nervous, I used to feel it a lot because I've always worked in really male-dominated areas. So I was an engineer. So when I was sitting in a classroom like this, there was like 2 women and about 100 men. I then actually thought I wanted to go into engineering, so I went and worked on a gold mine in Ghana, believe it or not, as one of my summer internships, and there were no women. And so I was like, okay, I can't be what you can't see, and there's no one around who looks like me, so I'm not going to do that. So then I went into consulting, which is what took me to South Africa, also no women. Then I made it to banking, not very many women, and then I went to tech. Still not a lot of women. And the thing I used to always say to myself is like, okay, when it comes to asking a question in a forum like this, and I was super nervous, I'd get into my head like, okay, it's not Sarah Fryer asking this question. I am asking it so that there will be a female voice in this room right now. Because I live in so many rooms where even if there are a few women, they don't speak up. And if you can just get in early, good job, you take down the pressure a little bit, and you open the door for everyone else. And so I would do it more in some ways trying to persuade. I was doing it on behalf of other people than instead of myself, and somehow that gave me the courage to kind of make the leap. So no, we might all look very polished, but like behind the surface, there's all sorts of like shit shows going on. Probably not allowed to use words like that in front of you all, but I have teenagers, so I know how you all roll. So don't ever get psyched out that the people all look perfect and they've got it all figured out. We absolutely do not. And become one of us, embrace the adrenaline, and definitely, if you can't do it for yourself, do it kind of for another reason, but it still makes you put your hand up.
Thank you, Sarah. And just on that, I heard one of my colleagues in work recently refer to that idea of like, you look really polished on the surface, but you're frantically, panicking in the background. And she described it as swan ladies, because swans look so graceful on the surface of the water, but underneath their feet are going like this. So yeah, thank you for that. Just before we move to Ambassador Photovat, I just want to welcome Monica McWilliams to our panel. As many of you, I'm sure, know, Monica McWilliams was a co-founder of the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, which was a party that was heavily involved in the Good Friday Agreement talks and was a strong voice at the table advocating for human rights, equality and the rights of victims. Monica is also a former Chief Commissioner of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and has spent decades as an academic at Ulster University. Monica, we're just talking about how, as women in positions of leadership, whether confidence is something that you went in with or whether it's something that you've grown over time. And we're just going to go to Ambassador Photovat first, and then if you'd like to come in on that, if that's okay, Ambassador.
Sure. I was going to say, just speaking of confidence, Monica McWilliams just walked in the room. I think that's a great question. I have not always had confidence, and I think it's something that you have to practice and practice and practice. And whenever you have opportunity to speak in public, most of us have some kind of stage fright. Most of us don't want to speak in public, but the more you do it, the more you get used to it. I think it's something you just have to push yourself to do, and then it becomes something natural to actually start to do. And then you get, people will start to encourage you and say, Kat will do it, she'll speak, as my team will constantly say. I'll say, no, I'm shy, and they all laugh. But, I think it's, again, something that you have to build. I don't think it's something everyone has naturally. I certainly didn't. And I think the more skills you develop, the more confident you get in yourself as well. We also have this thing that we call the wolf pack, where we will support women. Like, women will support other women speaking in a group, especially if there's a lot of men in a room. A lot of older men will like to speak speak and speak over women. And so we will support each other. So if one woman makes a point, then somebody from the other part of the wolf pack will support the woman who just spoke to make sure that that point was just made and emphasized. So we support each other as well. So I would encourage you all to support each other and give each other that confidence, because that network really, really builds that as well.
Just on that point about, because often in meetings, a woman will say something, the room will keep going, and then a man will say the same point, it's the same point, and suddenly it's like he cured cancer, and like, where did she go? As the man in the room, the thing that you can do is if that's happening, even just noticing it and saying, oh yeah, that's just like the point that got made earlier. Like, so your wolf pack doesn't have to just, you called it a wolf pack, right? I didn't use the wrong term. Doesn't just have to be other women. It's actually more important in many ways that we have allies, like across every gender diversity angle.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Monica, would you like to come in on the question of, were you always confident, and how did you build your confidence over time?
No, I was a country girl raised on a farm in Kilrea outside Coleraine. And, you know, it took me a long time not to, it was a good value my mother gave me, which was not to get above your station. You know that old Northern Irish thing, you know, don't get above yourself because you'll get knocked down pretty quick. Whereas I taught in America, and every time I taught an American student and I'd say, well done, they'd say, why, thank you, I thought I did pretty well myself. It was a completely different culture. So I was raised in that culture and didn't have much confidence, but at school it was great because I joined the debating society. I played hockey, I got my confidence from my teammates. Do one thing to your fellow school student. Every time that you do something and you hear them speak, or they've done something and they've been nervous about it, afterwards say to them, well done. We don't do that enough. We don't encourage each other enough. We don't empower each other enough. And I'll tell you, you'll go away feeling 6 foot higher when somebody else says it to you. Because you're the worst in beating yourself up. You're thinking, I could have done that better. Many a night I went to bed and had talks to myself and realised this is not a dream. I'm just saying what all night going over and over in my head, and this happened to me a lot in politics. You know, should have said this yesterday. I should have done this. And that comes from, you know, there's no good in saying should have, just make it better the next time and building that. But I remember my first interview going into BBC radio studio. Oh, gee, what age was I? I was only in my 20s. I was out of college at this stage, out of probably early university days. I was very active, and that got confidence from that. I did a lot of volunteering, raising money. It was better when I was 15 than I am now. I hate asking people for money. And it's always for other people that I'm asking, or for a cause. But again, in Ireland, you know, in Northern Ireland in particular, you almost felt a bit like a beggar if you were going out asking for money for something, even if it was a good cause. And the slogan here is building a better working world. But, you know, learn that, because at some time you will join an organisation that needs you to raise finances. Isn't that right, Paul? I'm with Paul in Politics in Action. I'm actually involved in one of the founding members of this, because this is what I believe is the future. And go back to the interview, I've got diverted. But anyway, after learning how to raise money, and it was always good to do that, I always say, you know, parity like charity starts at home. So I'm trying to tell my 2 sons at the minute that they need to get off the sofa and do a bit more volunteering and getting out. But I was asked to come into the studio in BBC to talk about whatever. I think I got involved on the Rape Crisis Centre and Women's Aid at the time, so domestic violence was just beginning to surface. And I didn't know the BBC studio had proper audio, and a microphone would probably, you know, be loud enough for the audience to hear. And I should have got Alan over there to train me. And I went in and started shouting down the microphone, roaring my head off. And that was lack of confidence. And the presenter was going, keep it down, keep it down. They can hear you, there's a microphone. And I came out totally ashamed, as we say in Northern Ireland, totally affronted. And it was a good learning experience. So what you've just said is the most important thing. Practice, practice, practice. How do you get practice? By taking the opportunity when somebody asks you. If they ask you, don't say, oh no, I couldn't do that. You can do it, and do it. And even if you make a mistake, build on that, because I'll tell you, I learned more from my mistakes than I did from my successes. And that's how you build your confidence. So I built this women's party to go into the peace talks because I knew that we had fantastic leaders in our community who were not getting recognised, who had built our peace process, and I wanted them at the table. But there were three other things. It wasn't just confidence that kind of held us back. It was cash, because most of the bigger parties have lots of finances and they give it, so I had to learn. And how I practiced was on a banana. An American came over and told us how to ask for money. Never leave a meeting without an ask. Always think about, okay, don't explain and describe too much about what you're doing. Bring that in a little fact sheet and leave it behind. And so you can have your best time is spent with your ask. What did I come in here for, and what I want them to remember? And the first time I did that was with, guess who? Hillary Clinton in the White House. In 1996, after we had been elected, in 97, St. Paddy's Day in the States, and they forgot to ask the Women's Coalition to go in and meet the President. And she then was told, could you meet with the Women's Coalition, because, we've forgotten about them. Well, it was the best thing ever happened. I was delighted. I can now tell the story, which I couldn't tell then. Two things happened. She was only meant to give us 10 minutes, and she gave us an hour. But some American said to me before, what's your ask? I thought, what does that mean? What's my ask? And then I realised, this person's telling me, don't leave the meeting without getting Hillary Clinton to do something. And so that night she stood up on the stage. She hadn't planned to speak, but she was introducing her husband, President Clinton. And the story's been told at this conference. And she said, I spoke about the role that women could contribute to the peace process in Northern Ireland. And up until that, I had been treated fairly derogatory by the other parties. See, after she said that, other parties kind of changed. They asked, what bribe did you give her to make that? I said, absolutely nothing. I was simply asked, what's your ask? And my ask to her was, when you get a chance to speak tonight, could you talk about us? And that's all it took. And so that night, when Bill Clinton came to meet us in the lineup, I was the last in the lineup, which is great, because sometimes when you're the last in the lineup, you get a few more things in than all the others, because they're moving so fast. Please don't say this, but now in the time of Twitter, you probably can. He said, he leaned over and he says to me, I think we were getting ready, he said, for this party tonight. I think my wife had a much more interesting time this afternoon than you did. He had just met all the political parties. So that was a very important thing, because whatever I'd said to her, she remembered. Then she went out and she built Vital Voices from what we had told her about what we were doing here. And they're here tonight. They're gathering everybody up. And the simple word was, and I'll say it to all of you, and I think your point is great, for men also to become vital voices for women. Women's voices are vital voices. And I'll leave you with the last words of my good friend May Blood, who fought with me for many years, and she's now deceased just before Christmas. And she attended all these all-male meetings. She was a trade unionist from the Shankill, worked in a factory, and rose up to the top. And she used to say at the meetings, watch my lips, I'm speaking, because nobody was listening. And so when she got a chance, she said it. And so she wrote her book, and the title was Watch My Lips, I'm Speaking. And just give a plug for mine now that I've talked about her book. And so the title of my book is Stand Up, Speak Out. Why did I pick that title? Because I had been told in the parliamentary chamber for 2 full years during our peace talks, shut up and sit down. And I thought, I'm not shutting up, I'm not sitting down. And because you've said that, I'm standing up and speaking out. So you do the same.
Thank you so much, Monica. We're going to open it back up. Are there any other questions for our panel? Yep, just here in the front.
Hi, I'm Jodie Williamson and I'm from Portadown College. My question is, what challenges have you faced because of your gender? And most importantly, so I can prepare myself a bit, how have you overcome them?
Thank you for your question. Does anyone want to take that first?
Well, I'll have a shot at that because I feel I faced nothing else but challenges because of my gender, because of, as I said, the culture. It's not just you know, I used to say we lived in an armed patriarchy here. You know, the men had guns as well as the conservative patriarchy, and we were up against that. And y'all, it's famous now, and I don't like to talk about it anymore, because all I'm ever asked is, what did it feel like to be called a silly woman or to be mooed at? I was mooed at when I got up to speak in the Parliament, and I'm a farmer's daughter, so I knew the subject I was speaking about, because my father had helped me write it. It was about animal welfare. It was the time of the BSE. You remember the hamburgers were infected and you weren't supposed to eat them and stuff. And that was the first time during our peace talks. And I suddenly heard moo, moo, moo across the chamber. This was elected, you know, chamber. It was called the Forum for Dialogue and Understanding. I renamed it the Forum for Monologue and Misunderstanding. And I could not believe it. So it hurt. We had an insult of the week notice board. And we put the insult on it, we put the time on it, and we put the person's name on it. And they would come past and say, I didn't say that. And I said, yeah, you did. And it was in Hansard, which made it even worse. So, you know, I knew that we couldn't actually, you'd have got, as I often was, being told I was going to be taken to court for pushing back, for, you know, before the Me Too movement, for calling it out. So I kind of don't want to go back to those days of remembering, because it hurt so much. I used to put on a body armour, a virtual armour on a Friday morning, knowing that I was going into a place that I was just going to face insult after insult. Some of it was sectarian, some of it was sexist, it was very misogynist, and it wasn't just verbal, it was physical. So it was kind of hard to put up with it. And when I used to put my posters up, my children would come home from school and say, take them down quick, they've just been completely ruined. And I won't say what it was, because it just would make you feel very bad about what was painted. But if you use your imagination, you can imagine what was painted over it. And I've just heard from the young women who are now running for office again in the Northern Ireland Assembly. And the last time, that's exactly what was happening to them, only it was worse. It wasn't worse. It was now by anonymous people on trolling on social media. But there are three other things. You talked about confidence, and I talked about cash, two others, well, culture as well. But for me, it was also childcare. Who's going to look after my kids if I'm going to be in politics? And if the Assembly doesn't close at night and it goes on to midnight, as a lot of parliamentary chambers do. And so the first motion I put down in that Assembly was that we would stop at 5 o'clock. And the second thing I proposed that we had childcare vouchers, and that if we did run over time, we wouldn't be out of pocket to have to pay double money to have someone mind our kids. Now, I had a fairly good partner, a husband, who was prepared to do that, but he was away too. So that's what keeps you out. And you have to think about your kids too, as women do and men do, and your domestic responsibilities. So you really do have to have a good partner. You do have to have somebody who's prepared to stand alongside a woman in public life, and be prepared to share in the domestic responsibilities. So to all of you young men, I'd say, stand up and speak out for the young women in your lives. And if they need you to do something, and in turn it'll be reciprocated, well, that's what helps each of us to get over some of the burdens that we face that you've just asked about. And that's called equality.
Thank you, Monica. Ambassador, do you want to come in on that question?
I mean, how can I follow Monica? You know, I would say similarly, as a mother, certainly questions, people have said, oh, you can't take this role on because you are, you know, you have to take care of your child, things that they would never ask a man. And I used to actually work with gang members, and in that role, there were a couple of jobs that I had taken on that people were basically saying, you know, you can't work with gang members, you're a woman. And I was like, why can't I work with gang members? I am a woman. But, you know, developing relationships, making them understand, like, I can take that on. It doesn't matter that I'm a woman. I can still take on, you know, those duties, those roles. People can still respect me, even though I'm a woman. So that certainly is something that I've also had to deal with. You know, even in taking on management, you'll see that glass ceiling that they talk about in terms of leadership, that we see that across the board globally, whether it be in Japan or in the United States, getting to those those top positions is where it gets very, very difficult in terms of a lot of people look towards men for leadership. And so having to prove yourself is very difficult as a woman sometimes. And again, making sure that you have, the education. Women in Japan, for example, are 70% more educated than men there. But almost 100% of their jobs there in terms of top-level management jobs are all men, even though the women are more educated. So, you have to make sure that we are looking at what are those roles and making sure that we are having more women in leadership positions, because we know women are more likely to be elevated then. And companies do better when men and women are working together. So this is, again, about equality and making all ships rise together. We all do better when we have 50% of the population and 50% of the population working together. And that's a case that was made over COVID as well. Many women left the workforce, and many companies came to us saying, how do we get women back? Because we were all doing better when we had a more diverse workforce.
Sarah, would you like to answer that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you work in tech in Silicon Valley, bro culture's a real thing. And so for me, it's a couple of ways to overcome it. Number one is just not to take no for an answer, just to keep, needling. That first job when I worked in Ghana on that gold mine, the first thing they told me when I showed up as my internship is that it was unlucky for women to be underground. I was like, well, that's going to be kind of hard because I'm on a gold mine. As far as I know, it's coming from down there. That's what I'm supposed to be working on. So I just kept needling until it was easier to just let me go underground than to put up with me. So don't let people give you the big no. Keep coming back again and again. I think turning it into a business advantage and making people realize that the reason to have diversity around the table is because you'll build a better product. You're more likely to reflect your customer, right? In my world of next door, our customer is literally the world. Everyone is a neighbor. And that means that our customer is 50-50, men, women. It is every age demographic. I mean, we can't allow you on the platform until you get to 13, but in this 13 through 103 or whatever, I think is our oldest neighbor that I know of right now. And so it is vital, frankly, that we look like our customer if we're going to build the best product. So you turn it into a business imperative rather than, I think, turning it into some sort of moral, compass thing. I think it's important for those reasons too, but I think if you try to lead as if it's a moral issue, it gets you into a zone that a lot of people quickly will push back on. But if you deal with it as a business imperative, I think that's a reason to get more diversity at the table. I think on Monica's point about things like childcare and so on, when I first joined Square, one of the first things I noticed, the COO was pretty sexist, frankly. I think I can say that now. We let him go on stage. But his first thing was, we do a Sunday afternoon meeting. It was a little bit of like a hazing moment. It starts at 4 o'clock and it runs, it runs late. And I was like, well, that is not going to work for me because I am the mom of 2 young kids and I need Sunday afternoons. And luckily, it didn't work for him. I worked for Jack Dorsey, and I turned to Jack, and Jack was like, no, you don't work for Keith. You don't have to show up. And I was like, well, what are we trying to solve for? And when I got to, I call it output, not input. If what you're worried about is the output, let's set stretch goals. Let's make sure we are achieving what we're here for, but let's not get into the how people have to do it. They don't have to show up on Sundays or whatever. And I always say, if your worry is that I'm not going to work hard enough, I have got you. I am going to so outwork you because I'm Northern Irish. And my God, we can outwork anyone. But I might not do it at the times that you want to do it. Single man, that doesn't have anything else going on in life to worry about. So you got to kind of get to the crux of make it a business imperative, make it for the good of the business, get to outputs, not inputs, and then let people do it however they want to do it.
Thank you, Sarah. Judith?
Yeah, so I think for me, you guys are very lucky that you're coming into the workplace when you are, because in the 20 plus years that I've been working, it's changed hugely. When I first started my career in professional services, I never thought I would be a leader because I wanted a family and that I didn't think the two things could coexist. But I think as we've moved along a trajectory, and to Sarah's point, equality isn't just about being the right thing to do, it's about you get better teams, you get better business outcomes when you have a gender balance. And I think for me, we need to get more women into leadership positions, because that's really where you can influence change. So, for myself as a partner, I pick my kids up from work every day, after school every day, which I would never have been able to do sort of 10 years ago. It would have been frowned upon. But I think when you're starting to role model those behaviours and create a more output-focused environment, then people feel free to be themselves, not only if they've children, but lots of people have other commitments outside of work. And you've got to find a way to make your work and your life fit together so that you can be happy in that environment. And I just think, we're all on a journey with it, but COVID has really accelerated that, and hybrid working is making it much easier now for people to balance their lives and get bring them the best of themselves to work, because they're able to balance their home life alongside their working life. And I'm very proud of the fact that 2 people in my team, 2 females in my team, got promoted last year to senior positions whilst on maternity leave. And that's now becoming the norm, which even, my eldest is 10, and 10 years ago, there was no way I was expecting a promotion when I was having my kids. But, now there are people being made partner while they're on maternity leave, and I just think the world has changed so much for the better. And it's up to you guys in the room to really enter the world of work and, keep that change happening and really, make it work for you.
Thank you so much, Judith. I think we have time for one more question. So just a show of hands, who has a question in the room? We might go right at the back there. Clara. Thank you. And if you just give us your name and school first.
Hi, I'm Ellen Taylor and I'm from Down High School. And my question is, so women aren't even included in Troubles education or across the whole curriculum in STEM. So how can we ensure education system includes women?
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant question. Is there anyone who would like to take that first? Monica, please. Right at the back.
Put up your hand so I can see you. Good on you. I've been quoting you all week. Every chance I got. I met Ellen for the first time last week in the Lyric Theatre, and she was being asked about her role in the Youth Parliament and about Northern Ireland in the future. And I was standing beside her, and she told me that about the GSCEs, how could I forget my O-levels? And about, I don't know if you heard this, but everywhere, and yesterday on the stage when I was on the panel, I told the entire conference what you told me, which was that in that history curriculum, there are 2 mentions of women in the peace process. And Bernadette Devlin Megaliski, of course, was the only woman, the youngest ever, 21, elected to Westminster, and clearly a civil rights activist back in my day. And the other mention was of women handing out tea and buns when the British soldiers first arrived. I nearly dropped when she told me that, because I am one of those women that was back then and formed the Women's Coalition, and I'm a signatory, the only signatory to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, as a leader of the party, the only woman leader of a party. And I make up one of the 3% in the world of women who've signed an international peace treaty. How could that not be in your history curriculum? And yet it's not. How could it, the wonderful women who led many of the social movements in Northern Ireland, in terms of the trade union movement, bringing both sides together, being not just non-sectarian but anti-sectarian, those women are famous. They're not in your history curriculum. And I don't know if you've seen this project that they've called Her Story, which is really a peace heroine story. It's here at Queen's. If you get a chance, go and see it. It's over in the Lanyon building, and it's these great big posters. You get a shock when you see yourself at 6 foot in a poster, because you start looking, thinking, I didn't get that makeup on right this morning. And look, my mascara's running down. Oh, I wish I had done that properly and taken the time. We're hard on ourselves. So if you get a chance, go over, because it's 25 years later, and it's this week, and it's this conference that have put women up from a footnote back onto the history page. So thank you, Ellen. I've been quoting you on BBC, I've been quoting you on the radio, I've been quoting you everywhere. So my message to you is if you get somebody like me and you want them to fix something, just say, come here, I tell you something, did you know? Which is what Ellen did to me, and as a result of that, I've been repeating it all week. So thank you, Ellen. And we need the history curriculum changed.
Thank you so much, Monica. Judith, do you want to answer that one as well?
I'm not sure I can follow that, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I think to your point about encouraging more women into STEM, it's something that we really need to focus on. I think, Sarah will talk to this as well in terms of tech. And, when I look at our own kind of tech teams, they're still very male dominated, and that goes back to schools. So there is a bit of how we educate people in schools and, from the age of primary school upwards to understand that the traditional career paths aren't the only option, and actually try things that are new, try things you don't understand. There's plenty of technology and tools and support and programs to help you, but you've got to be curious. You've got to look for opportunities to try new things, and that's the only way we're going to get a more diverse STEM career pathway.
Thank you, Judith. And that's kind of what you were mentioning earlier, Sarah, about being curious, trying things, try everything if you can. Yeah. Do you want to come in on that question?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love the her story, because it's a phrase that gets used a lot more, but you all need to kind of see it and point it out, right? It's not just women in history books. There are no women statues. When you walk around cities, you go on the walking tour and your parents bore the shit out of you. There's no women on statues. There's no women on, very few women on currency. There's just all these places where it's like we have not existed for centuries. And so pointing it out is part of the beginning. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so that will be the starting point. And I'm really excited for your generation, because I think you see these things. And by the way, it's not just women, it's all minorities, right? Living in the US, you see Black history is taught completely differently today. It's beginning to change, but it's almost like that community didn't exist for the last 100 plus years. On the STEM side, it starts super early. And so it's incumbent on all of us. You all now are mentors and coaches to the wee ones that you see coming up into kindergarten and making their way up through primary school, to show up and to tell them STEM's cool. Like I just talked to a bunch of girls at lunch, or young women, and the fact that you all were studying, you all had some sort of STEM in your A-level curriculum made me super happy to hear. I found going into school with my kids, I'd usually try to sneak out every couple of weeks to go in and help with, say, math when they were, 6, 7, 8. And I had one girl I remember in my son's class say, Mrs. Riley, because that's my alter ego, because I'm also a rampant feminist, so I didn't change my name. But Mrs. Riley, girls are no good at math. And I was like, oh my God, first of all, it's maths, but you absolutely are. Whoever's told you that is stupid. This is what I do for a living. I was a CFO at the time at Square. I'm like, I count all the money. It's the best job in the world. And you just have to kind of put it in their language, but also help them see it. And then even in areas like computer science, right, which is where the world is gone, right? That is the career. I mean, the world is being eaten alive by software. You should know something about CS at this stage in your life. It would be like saying you didn't want to know something about a foreign language, for example. But most CS programs begin with teaching kids how to program a game. And frankly, most girls are not that interested in computer games. Again, that's a big gender stereotype, but it's kind of true. Like, my daughter loves programming, has zero interest in computer games. And so every time I've tried to put her in an after-schools CS program or a summer program or whatever, I ask, what's the curriculum? It's always gaming. I'm like, oh my God, like there's so many things you could build with computer programming. Why does it always have to go back to a game? And today I think people are starting to hear that and understand that and allow for way more flexibility. But that is often how it's taught. And then you wonder why there are no women in the technical side of our companies. So it starts very early, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So your job is, because we're kind of blind at this age, we're like the frogs, the proverbial frog that's boiled alive. You all still have this benefit of beginner's mind. You can see the crazy stuff. Thank you for noticing that there's no women in history books. And once you see it, you can't not see it. So call it out.
Thank you, Sarah. Monica, did you want to come in there at all?
I was just saying, take a wee walk around Queen's. Every building's named after a man. Why? Because the guy had money. And so they left their money to Queen's. So I used to say, again, I don't care anymore, that if you had rich dead women or dead rich women, I didn't care which order they came in, just start, making sure that if you donate, that somebody names something after you. And it's good now that, a few statues somewhere are getting to say, oh, well, it just only be Florence Nightingale. Everywhere I went, Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale's hundreds of years behind, and she was, the Crimea War, and she was a nurse. Great, but I want to see more statues than Florence flippin' Nightingale. And so this is my message now when I look up, and I've just come from lunch, which was great. They just give honorary doctorates to men and women, and 3 good Americans and stuff. And I was looking to my friend Milan, who got Verveer from Georgetown, Women, Peace and Security, and she got a doctorate, and she said to me, these portraits are all men. And I said, yeah, I kind of said that to Queen's a few years ago. I said, that's all the chancellors. So the first woman chancellor is Hillary Clinton, and so that'll be the first portrait. So she'll join all the men. And on the other side, it's great that now they've got a few women. And you know what? I'm going to be one of them. They've just told me they're going to paint a portrait of me. And I'm really delighted. But the other thing I should tell you is I'm kind of embarrassed too. Because if my mother was around, she'd say, what are you doing up there on that wall?
Thank you so much, Monica. We're just about to wrap up this first panel of the discussion, but just before we do, I'd love to hear from Ambassador Fodavat about the importance of education in highlighting women's role in peace building and the role of education in general. I think, it's one of those things that is crucial to any peace process anywhere. Ambassador, if you'd like to come in.
I think to your point, if you can see it, you can be it. I think, having someone like Monica Williams here, here is a woman in history right before us, and I think it's so important. And when you were speaking, I was thinking that sounds like a petition and a campaign, and maybe somebody should get started on making sure that the people that are building the curriculum know this information. And I think it's important to, energize yourselves, take, control of that, and make sure that your message is being heard. I mean, you have a whole group of youth students right here that can help you push that message and make sure that curriculum is being included. And we've seen that just having that representation across the board globally is so important for both girls and boys, because, that's something that, my son, I'm going to give I always use my poor son as an example, and so people, when they meet him, they're like, oh, it's you. He originally, I started working at the State Department when Secretary Clinton was Secretary of State, and so we used to take our kids to work. You have to take your kid to work day. And so he would come in every year and see Secretary Clinton. And then when Secretary Kerry came in, I took him in to see Secretary Kerry, and when Secretary Kerry walked in, he was like, he's a man? And he didn't understand that you could actually, that's how much he knew of Hillary Clinton. He didn't understand that you could be a man and be Secretary of State. And thank goodness Secretary Kerry had a dog, so that made him very happy. But it's one of those things where, just that symbolism and just making sure that people see, opportunities for someone that looks like them, or someone that is like them, or even somebody that's not like them. That diversity is so important across the board, and making sure both in STEM, in politics, in activism, that these opportunities are open for you all over the world.
Thank you so much. Can we have a huge round of applause for all of our panelists? And Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but I think we can all agree that was a fantastic discussion. Thank you all for your questions, for bringing questions to the panel, and for all your responses. It's really been a fantastic afternoon, I think we can all agree. And I just want to close on something we mentioned at the start about peace and the role of peace in Northern Ireland. Just to say that peace is not guaranteed, and just having a peace agreement, it doesn't guarantee peace forever. What guarantees peace is the efforts that all of us in this room make every day alongside people of all ages, religions, races, backgrounds to uphold and promote it. And young people, including all of you here, have a significant role to play in that. And our peace is only as strong as the commitment that we all show to securing it and advocating for it every day. And there's loads of opportunities for all of you today to become the next generation of peace builders and peace advocates, and to build on the work of these incredible women who helped pave the way to where we are now, 25 years on from the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. There's so many fantastic organisations and individuals who are working tirelessly on the ground every day, promoting peace, equality, human rights, and I'm biased, but including so many fantastic women in the Northern Ireland women's sector. Here at Politics in Action, we like to emphasise the action part of our name, and we encourage all of you to take action, no matter how small, to work towards peace in our shared society. I hope you all enjoyed the discussion as much as I have, and thank you all so much for being here, for contributing. And we're going to pass over now for the second panel of the afternoon. But before we do that, just another huge round of applause for our fantastic panel and to all of you for being here. Thank you.
So, we're starting off with our second panel of the evening with some of the youngest MLAs in the Northern Ireland Assembly. We've also got Robbie Butler on the panel to represent the UUP. So, to introduce our members of the panel, we have Emma Sheeran, who's the Mid-Ulster Sinn Féin MLA. We have Johnny Buckley, who is Upper Ban. We also have Owen, who is also Upper Ban. We have Robbie, who is Lagan Valley. And we have Cara, who is East Derry. So, it is great to be here. If you told 16-year-old me that I'd be standing in a room full of 250 young people interviewing 5 politicians, I think you wouldn't believe it, but it's definitely a big step for me, so thank you all for having me. But I'll explain who I am. My name's Dermot. I was involved in the Politics in Action rebrand process, so I got to help kind of work on the website, kind of help design everything, and I'm a former member of Youth Parliament for Newry and Armagh. I've been involved in the youth sector a couple of years now. I've been doing interviews and that kind of thing on my own podcast, so if any of you are ever bored, feel free to give my podcast a listen. But I think we're ready to kick off, I think. So the first question is the exact same as the one on the last panel, which is, what does peace mean to you? So I think we'll start off with Emma and move our way over.
Thanks very much, Dermot. So I suppose what peace means to me, I was 6 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, so I grew up in a very rural area in South Derry. I see some of the people from Marfelt up in the crowd, which is in my area. So obviously completely sort of cocooned from what was happening at the time, and didn't experience any sort of violence. And coming from a Republican family, my parents' generation didn't have that experience, and faced discrimination, harassment, intimidation, couldn't drive for 10 miles without going through 2 or 3 checkpoints and getting the night ruined on them. So I suppose knowing that and hearing those sorts of stories and growing up in a situation where I was able to prosper, I was able to go to university and choose what I wanted to work as and live sort of free from that fear, and didn't have to hide who I was or hide my politics. Again, the year after I was born, a Sinn Féin councillor in my area was murdered outside of his work. I've been a Sinn Féin rep now for years and never had to have any fear around expressing that. So that's what peace means to me, just living in peace.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all. The last time I was in this lecture theatre was for a lecture, believe it or not. I think probably my lecturer would be as horrified to see me at the front giving the lecture back as I am to be sitting here. But it really is a pleasure to be with you all, and it's great to see so many young people that are actively engaged in the field of politics today. And that's regardless across the board. Whenever I was your age, I remember travelling to political events with my school at the time. At that stage, it was Lurgan College, and there was only a small number of us. But look how many now are engaged politically to learn about this place and its complexities and indeed its politics. It really is fascinating. And I just want to give a big shout out to Loretto College from Donegal, who are here as well. You're very welcome, and it's great to see the collaborative work that's going on with Portadown College, and I hope you found this event very useful as well. I've had a lot of thought into what does peace mean to me. And you know something, I think if we're all honest, peace means many things to many different people. And especially when we look at it from a Northern Irish context, what does peace mean? For me, peace means the absence of fear of violence. Northern Ireland come through some very, very difficult times. We all know that history. It's a very complex history. It means many different things to many people. But it was actually crystallized to me through my mother. My mother was brought up in an environment that many of your parents were brought up in, where they experienced firsthand the touch of violence on our communities. And you know something, when I entered the field of politics, to this day, and I only got married last year, but my mother didn't understand what it was to be involved in politics. And when she was hearing of the news about the constant threat, and sadly it still exists because we have an imperfect peace and we still have those that would try to drag this place back to those dark times. But even to this day, my mother would have checked under my car. And I really tried to understand what that meant, because I would have said to her, Mum, that doesn't apply to me. But she said, you don't understand what I grew up in. And essentially, 25 years on, if there's a story for anybody to talk about the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and its success, it's the absence of the fear of violence, which is essentially crystallised peace that we can gather here today and talk about it as one community.
I think that was a brilliant answer for both Emma and Jonathan. And I think the point of the idea of being involved in politics is something that all of us have really benefited from, particularly those of us in this room. I think there was, for a long time, even as I was growing up to a small extent, the idea that we didn't talk about politics. And I think we're in a much better position now. And I think it's absolutely brilliant to hear that. And I think that is exactly what this conference is all about. It's about being able to share these stories, to come together and to have these discussions. But thank you very much for that answer. On to you, Owen.
Yeah, thank you, Dermot, and thank you, Politics in Action, and all of the young people who are here. I think it's really important, 25 years on from the agreement, that it's not all about looking back, because the agreement is yours, it belongs to all of you, and we now need to start looking about how we recapture that courage and that spirit to look ahead to the next 25 years and what we can achieve going forward. On a personal level for me, I mean, I wasn't born when the agreement was signed. Luckily, I didn't have the experience of others in terms of experiencing the horrors of the Troubles. And I'm young enough to have benefited fully from the achievements of people who reached across bitter divides in 1998. But I'm also conscious that peace is about much more than just the absence of violence. It's about overcoming conflict, it's about breaking down prejudice and division in society, and if we're honest, I think we've achieved a relative peace, and I've grown up in a society that's utterly transformed from the society of my parents and grandparents. We no longer go out in the morning and fear that at the dinner table that night someone will be missing, and we need to really cherish that. But what we've done in some respects is we've imported the conflict into our politics. So far too often, for example, we see this tribal conflict in the institutions at the Assembly. The institutions aren't operating. And some of the issues that I think matter to all of us are sometimes overshadowed and drowned out. We need to make more progress in terms of bringing people in Northern Ireland together. So look at our education system. 90% of our young people are still educated separately on the basis of their community background. We still have segregation in housing in our communities. If I reflect, for example, where I grew up, not too far from Johnny, I didn't know anybody from Johnny's background until I was about 18, whenever I came to Queen's. My community background dictated what sports I could play, who my friends were, where I went to school. And I think that 25 years on, we need to start breaking down those barriers and divisions in society, and we will have achieved real peace whenever we eliminate those prejudices and sectarianism that has lingered for far too long in Northern Ireland. And I think that's a job for all of us in this room. is being grateful for the foundations and the progress that has been led, but looking at what we can do to show that same courage to build an even better future going forward.
That's an excellent answer. And obviously, Mr. Butler here is slightly older than his other panel friends, born a little bit earlier before the agreement. But obviously, you've got different perspectives on this, I'd say, Robbie, but I'd love to hear them.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Thanks to Politics in Action and all of the schools that have taken part in for coming here today. I think the first question was asked by Ugna there from St Patrick's in Lisburn. And I was looking around at all of the other faces of all of the young people that I've met and created friendships with. So the end point is kind of where we are here today, which is completely different from where I was, not just in 1998, but before that, because in 1998 I was 26. So I'm the only person on the panel here who voted at that time, and I voted yes for the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement. But in 1998 I was also a prison officer. And I was that person, like Johnny had talked about. I wasn't the parent who was checking under the car, I was the person checking under the car. And as has been rightly pointed out by a couple of the panel members, we have a relative peace, because only within this last few weeks we've seen the attempted murder of a prison officer. But sadly, since 1998, what sometimes is missed is we've had almost 200 deaths, 200 murders, almost 200 murders at the hands of either Republican or Loyalists terrorists, which is a tragedy, given the gift that we got in 1998. So I'm going to paint a picture of what peace means to me. It goes back even further than that, okay? And this is really, really important. You don't live in the past, but you learn from the past, a wee bit like Rafiki, from The Lion King. I was born in 1972, the year of the greatest amount of violence and deaths in Northern Ireland. And when my mum was pregnant with me, there were two incidents that happened that kind of make it a miracle that I'm here today. So she was very close to a bomb, which blew her across, I think she calls it the scullery, which is like the kitchen diner, and was lucky there, and also was caught up in a Loyalist Republican gunfight in West Belfast, where my granda lived. So I'm kind of lucky to be here because there was two near misses there. As I've said, I was a prison officer for a while, but I also, in 1988, walked past a bomb that blew the heart out of Lisburn. I knew it was a bomb. This is how sad Northern Ireland was. When you saw a car parked in a town centre and there was nobody at it, the first thought that came to your head was that's a bomb. But we were it was so ground into us that it was just a bomb. The police will let us know if we need to run. And at the end of the street from where I worked, I was a butcher, and I seen a police officer doing this. And I couldn't hear him, but he was doing this. He was waving me, and I started to run. And I run around the corner into the shop where I worked, and the bomb went off. Literally that. And then in 1998, we got a chance to vote for something better. So I was born in 72, year of greatest violence. In 1998, something else happened. It wasn't just the Good Friday Agreement. My daughter was born, my first child, Robin. So she was born in 1998, which was a real sea change in Northern Ireland. So the generation that was born in 1998 and beyond got a promise which was better than I got in 72. In 2023, I'm not going to have any more babies. But if I did, I would want them to have an even better chance than my daughter got in 1998. Thank you.
Very, very well answered, Robbie. Going on to Cara Hunter from the STLP.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to thank Politics in Action for having me here today. And again, it is fantastic to see so many young people engaged and asking questions about politics and our political landscape here. I think for me, I'm 27, so I was only like 2 years old when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. For me, peace, these are the conversations I have with my family and my father. He's from a border town in West Tyrone, and I ask him about his childhood, and it's coloured with stories of bullets and bombs and blood and loss. And what peace means to me is that's something I'll never have to endure. Thankfully, I had a very happy and safe childhood filled with security. And sadly, you know, generations before me didn't have that opportunity. But what peace means to me is, yes, there's the absence of violence and the absence of war, but it also means that our people here aren't surviving anymore. They have the opportunity to thrive. And I think that's why the conversations that we've had over the past week about the Good Friday Agreement are, yes, we're having conversations about our past and we're learning from our past and our difficulties, but we're also looking forward to a brighter future. Where are we and where can we be? And that's why I think it's so fantastic we've had American representation here throughout the past week or two and having those conversations about opportunities, about where we go from here. But peace, ultimately, we've seen such drastic positive changes and more mixed marriages. I hope that we'll see more integrated schools in years to come. But I think we're really at an opportunity in our history here to really move forward. And I really think the Good Friday Agreement has been a perfect foundation to build a better future for our young people.
That's an excellent answer. And for this question, this is the last one I'll offer, and then we'll open it up to the floor. But this is one I'm going to put to the Assembly's youngest MLA in Owen Tennyson, and I'll obviously open it up to the rest of the panel, but I want to start off with Owen. Going through politics, for anyone, there are a lot of challenges. Getting into the room, getting elected, all of those things often provide massive challenges. But my question is, what are the biggest barriers you faced, specifically as a young person going into politics? And for everyone in this room here who may someday decide they want to actually go into frontline politics, what advice would you offer them in overcoming those challenges?
That's a very good question. I guess I got involved in politics when I was here at Queen's, and it was actually this time 5 years ago. So the great and the good had arrived in Belfast to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. And I had joined the Alliance Party a few months earlier, but it was really what spurred me on to go along to my first meeting. And I remember walking into the room and feeling like I wanted to contribute, and by contribute I thought I'd be going out and leafleting for somebody else. And at my first meeting they said, "We need another candidate for council, would you be interested?" To which I completely balked and said, "Absolutely not, no way, I'm far too young, I'm too inexperienced, I don't know how this politics stuff works, I'm just here to help somebody else out." And the people in that room took a chance on me and really encouraged me, and eventually I said yes, and I ended up getting elected a year later. And that taught me, first of all, to take the opportunities that come your way and believe in yourself, because sometimes it's easy to be safe and say, no, this is a bit risky, I'm not going to put my head above the parapet, I'm not going to do it. I didn't know anybody from my local area that had even joined the Alliance Party at that stage, never mind stood. So that's the first piece of advice I'd say, is take the opportunities that come your way. But there's certainly a challenge in being a young person in politics, and I found this particularly when I first got elected to local government, where people thought that I was elected as a fluke and that the party ran a young person as some sort of token gesture, and they didn't really believe they had a chance in that area, and they didn't know what they were going to do with me now that I was elected. And I had to prove people wrong, and I had to take the lead in my council group. I was our group leader for a period. I handled some really difficult and controversial issues, and I proved over a period of time that I was just as capable as everybody else in that chamber. And I think that's part of why I am where I am now, is because whenever people challenged me and said, "Oh, well, what would you know about the Good Friday Agreement? You weren't born. What would you know about the Troubles?" I said, well, I have a perspective. I represent the diversity of our community, and young people have a stake in this place. And it almost made me double down and work even harder and make me want to prove myself even more. And I always use this analogy, and that's, council elections are coming up again this year, and there are loads of young people running, which is really positive to see, and they will face the same challenges as me, where people say they're naive, they don't know what they're talking about, they've no life experience. But think about what a council does, the services that it provides: leisure services, sports pitches, recreation. Who are the users of those services? Young people, by and large. So surely young people should have a say in how those services are operated and managed. Surely the young people know something about what they want to see from their local community and their local services. So I think when you have a diverse range of voices in the room, be it in politics, be it in business or elsewhere, that leads to better informed debate for people from different perspectives, and it also leads to better decisions and outcomes. So my one piece of advice is speak up. Never think that you're too young or too inexperienced, because often what you lack in experience, you make up for in terms of ability. And just never let somebody say that you're too young, because you're always too young until you do it.
I think that's a brilliant answer. We'll go on to Jonathan Buckley.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question because, look, this coming November, I will have been in elected politics for 10 years. So I was elected just at 22. And I remember whenever I left school at 17, I was going down a road of electrical engineering and apprenticeship. Very good career opportunities. And I remember just before that in the school, the careers advisor came in, and I still see the careers advisor today. And genuinely the conversation was, Johnny, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And I've asked a lot of young people today that I've spoke to, where do you want to be? What's your career profession that you want to enter? And I said to the careers advisor, I love debating. I'd love to get involved in politics. And he said to me in a very innocent way, he said, Johnny, come on. You have to be born into politics. You have to understand how the systems work. It just doesn't work like that. Go and get a career, and if you want in the future, you can come back to it. And for the first time actually in my life, I accepted what he had said, because I normally challenge these things. And I went into a career and I was studying electrical engineering in a food factory. And it was a great career, great opportunities. I had money in my pocket, a car, things seemed good. But in the back of my head was, why not? And I'd say to any young person today, always have that in your head when you're challenged about something that you're passionate about. Why not? So I went and I got back into school. I did my A-levels. And I went to Queen's University, and I opened up more and more opportunity to get involved in politics. It requires two things, in my opinion. Yes, persistence, but also patience, because you need to understand how the political systems work to play a full and proper part within them. Mentorship, it was mentioned earlier in the panel, is essential to anybody that wants to gain political experience and understand how the systems work. If you're going to get involved, you have to remember everybody makes mistakes. I'd say everybody on this panel has made mistakes in not only political life, but personal life, that if you could turn back, you would change. But the reality is, you can't change them, but you can learn from them. And just for anybody now that wants to get involved in the life of politics, and if many of you asked this question, whenever I first started out and I tried to see what political party fitted me, I came to the very quick understanding that if I tried to look at political parties through the lens of which one do I agree with every single policy, there was none that I would join. There is, and I know I think if everybody's honest in this panel, there's a diverse debate within political parties as to what you see the future and what you think your policy should be. But you try to come to a collective decision. So look through it through the lens of where best fits for me and try to play your part.
Is this still working? There it is. We'll go on to Emma now.
Thanks very much. That's a good question. I suppose unlike some of the other answers, I had no aspirations to be a politician, and it's not a word that I ever use to describe myself. At sort of a young age, I spoke before about the fact that I come from a Republican family, but politics was never discussed in our house, ever. And at probably 12, 13, I started to learn about what had happened in Ireland and become aware of some of the societal issues that were happening around me, and tied the two things together very clearly and just wanted to make a difference. So got involved in my local area volunteering, and I would have been, I'm not religious, but I would have been involved in certain things even that my local church were doing in terms of helping out, and like bake sales and things with the elderly and those sorts of initiatives. Then I joined Sinn Féin as an activist and had absolutely no desire to be an elected rep. And I suppose then when you talk about challenges, for me, I was out canvassing and doing everything that I could because I want to change. I want to change this country. I want to see change, and I believe that the party that I'm a member of is probably the most viable vehicle to do that as part of a collective, and that's what drove me. And then I was approached and asked if I would stand, and said absolutely no way. And they wore me down, and I went into the assembly. So I received an awful lot of support, and that's probably, obviously I'm one of 3 MLAs in Mid-Ulster. Michelle O'Neill, Linda Dillon are both colleagues, and like the likes of Michelle, just like there's always somebody at the end of the phone call. We do face challenges. You get messages in the middle of the night. You get people who want to bombard you with issue after issue, and people that will abuse the position that you're in and take advantage of that. But I suppose when you're part of a collective and you have people who have your back and people that you can speak to and get advice from, that sort of helps with those challenges. And an awful lot of what the earlier panel was talking about in terms of misogyny and all of that, I don't experience that so much. And I suppose when I do, I have learned not to take it personally. And again, like 15 of our MLAs are women, so there's a strong cohort there of, I suppose, sisterhood and people that you can turn to for support. So that's, I think, what is changing with politics in the North, and that outward, the sort of stuff that Monica McWilliams was describing earlier, thankfully doesn't happen anymore and doesn't tolerate it. But I mean, it's a job not without its challenges, but very, very rewarding. And somebody contacts you and you can see that you've made a difference in their life. It's sort of, that the feel good of that blows away the other 3 people that called you a useless bleep that day, which happens an awful lot. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
It's a brilliant answer, and we'll go to Cara from.
Thank you. Well, I would say is I believe politics found me. I had absolutely no political aspirations, and I always thought, similar to what Johnny had said, you would either be born into it or have to have maybe like a PhD in political philosophy or something of that nature. I sort of fell into politics by accident. I have a degree in broadcast journalism, and throughout my, it's a bachelor's degree, throughout my degree, I had lost my best friend. Sadly, he had died by suicide. And I was in the last month of my degree, and I needed to do a student documentary. So I had reached out across the North to all the political parties just for a brief comment on suicide in the North, the ceasefire generation and transgenerational trauma. It was something I was really, really interested in. And it was the SDLP got back to me. It was the West Tyrone MLA, Daniel McCrossan. And I remember sitting in his office thinking, this is incredible, look at this, and pictures of John Hume and the Good Friday Agreement. I was really intrigued. And he had given me a few minutes of his time. And at this point, I was a passionate nationalist, but sort of politically homeless. I hadn't really picked, where I stand just yet. I was still very young. And Daniel had said to me, do you know, if you're this passionate, you can actually run for local government and run on these issues. This is a rural constituency, and there's still a number of barriers to mental health and stigma surrounding mental health, and that's something you can raise in local council. And I think the question that you asked there is, I can't say it enough. Young people, it's so important to believe in yourself. Just go for it and put yourself forward for any opportunities that come your way. Monica had touched on it so perfectly around the importance of making mistakes, because we learn from them, and you get stronger every time, so there's no need to be embarrassed if you've done something wrong. Just learn from it along the way. But that was the story for me, was I always say, if you care. But when we approach candidates for local council, the first question I'll ask them is, well, do you care about people? Do you care about your community? And if the answer is yes, well, we can work around teaching you the history and the politics and things of that nature. But ultimately, if politics is something you're thinking and getting into, don't let your age stop you. Because people will take you seriously. You just have to care ultimately about people. And with issues like transgenerational trauma and like suicide prevention, we need as many young people and their lived experience of maybe you've struggled getting access to mental health support or you're on the CAMHS waiting list. Those are the stories that we need to hear, and we need more young people telling their stories in our local government.
Very well answered. I don't know that Robbie wants to give it. You can give it a shot.
This is awkward.
This
is awkward.
You can give it a shot if you want.
I'll give it a shot. I can't answer this question in the manner that the young people to my left and right have answered this, because I only got involved in politics in my 40s. So I haven't even been in politics as long as some of these guys here as well. So he's a veteran, 10-year veteran. This is 2023. So yeah, okay, start again. age isn't the only barrier to politics. So some people might see themselves as too young to enter into politics and have a voice, and that's a lie. Another lie is that you aren't academically or professionally qualified to be a politician. Another lie. Your passion, my passion, isn't important enough for me to get involved in politics. Another lie. If you're passionate about people, if you're passionate about improving people's lives, if you're passionate about change that is change for the better, then politics could be for you. But it doesn't have to be just now. If it is, go for it. Absolutely go for it. And if it's not, don't be afraid to try other things. So very, very quickly, if it's okay. Like some of the guys here, I had no notion of politics growing up. I was kind of like, naturally, didn't know any politicians, did vote, but didn't know anybody in any parties, didn't know, just became a butcher, became a prison officer, became a firefighter. And the fire service was a phenomenal job. I started that in 2000, and in 2013, 14, I was still being promoted, and I still had ideas on being like a district commander or a group commander, maybe even an assistant chief at some stage. But my motivation for getting into politics in my early 40s, I suppose, early 40s, was that when I looked at politics in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to be honest here, when I looked at unionist politics, which I'm a unionist, I wasn't terribly pleased about perhaps how the trajectory of it and how unionism was speaking for Northern Ireland. And I'm not talking about any party or any individuals here. But in life, when you're thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to go, what you'll do is you'll look at other people and you'll say, they're wick or they're brilliant, and you'll compare yourself. It's just what we do. And I did this comparison in my head for the politics that I wanted to see. And rather than just critique people and say, you aren't good at it, I sort of accepted that actually it's maybe more difficult than you think. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And that's literally how I ended up in politics a number of years ago. And I'll be honest with you guys, it is the hardest job I've done. Of all of the jobs I've done, as I said, I've been a butcher, I've been a prison officer, I've been a firefighter, and I've been to any type of scene that you can imagine. I've been to all those things. And politics is the hardest thing I've ever done. But it'll only be hard on you if you care about people. If you're interested in people, politics is for you. If you're not too much interested in people, and that's okay, because there's different personality types out there, I would say it's possibly not for you. But I'm going to just finish on this wee one here. I don't know if this was done deliberately or not, but this is a wee bit like, look, you hold up your mic. Look, this is like a wee Good Friday Agreement moment. Look, I get the green mic, and she gets the orange mic, you know, so fair play, whoever planted those.
That's why I've got the red one.
I think that was Alan. I think it was the sound man.
Very, very well answered. I think now we're going to open it up to the floor. So if you have questions, oh my God, you have loads of questions.
I'm Sabrina Baptista. I go to Portadown College. Our school is currently doing a project with Loretto, and we've talked a lot about youth voice, and obviously with young people in the panel and a person who's very passionate about young people. I would like to know what your opinion is on maybe lowering the age of voting to 16, and if you think that would either damage or help your vote, you know, if people that were 16, 17 weren't able to vote.
That's a brilliant question, and I think it's actually very topical. I was speaking to someone from Fianna Fáil the other day, and I know that's a very pressing issue down south. So if we maybe get the institutions up and running, that could be really in the agenda. But I think, will we start off with Cara this time?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think it's a fantastic question. I'm our party's representative and spokesperson for children and young people, and having engaged with young people on the issue, the general sort of consensus, I've yet to hear anybody say that they wouldn't want it to go down to 16. I think I would wholeheartedly support it. It's our party stance also. And do I think it will positively impact our party's vote? Yeah, marginally. I think it probably would. Mostly in my constituency, I've definitely seen an increase in young people getting really politically involved. We've seen with the things like the climate strikes, we've really seen the incredible role that young people have played, and especially now with the cuts to education across Belfast as well, we have seen people taken to the streets and, you know, having their voices heard about the lack of continued underinvestment in our young people and cuts to things like youth clubs. So I think young people have a voice. Let's hear it. Your voice is your vote, and we would wholeheartedly support lowering the age.
Very well answered. Emma, your party polled, I think, the best in the 18 to 24 age group. So I want to hear your thoughts on whether or not we should drop it down to 16 to 24.
Yeah, I mean, you can drink at 16. I'm joking, you can't drink at 16. But you can work at 16. You can work at 16 and you pay taxes. So you contribute to the system. So you should be able to have a say in who then is operating that system. So, yeah, I mean, I believe that our party probably would benefit from lowering the voting age to 16 because we do obviously appeal to younger people, being that we are a progressive party, and again we've seen loads of, particularly I suppose in the 26 counties where an awful lot of referenda have decided law change where young people were pivotal in that, and people that weren't even able to vote were out on the streets campaigning. We've seen that both through marriage equality and the repeal of the 8th. So young people at 16 absolutely agree that they should be able to vote and think it's a good idea.
Very similarly, I know for, especially in the kind of earlier 2000s, Jonathan, your party always very strongly pulled a very strong young vote, and I think they did in the last Assembly election as well. So I want to hear your thoughts on dropping it down to 16.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm very much speaking from a personal capacity here. You know, I was somebody that was involved in politics young, had to get myself educated and get involved in it, but I remember being involved in the Northern Ireland Youth Panel, which actually predated or was the pre-runner towards the Northern Ireland Youth Assembly. And I met with people, we had these discussions about lowering the age, etc. And I remember when I was 16 actually saying, yeah, that was a very good idea. But, you know, politics is also about sometimes saying which is not so popular in the room, and I don't think it will be because many of you are probably advocating the same thing that I was at that time. But having come through what I have and seeing how the complexities of politics and how actually things can change even in your own life and your own circumstances and your own learning, actually, on reflection, I don't think it would be a good idea at this stage. I think there is a role for young people to play in politics, particularly those of 16 and younger. And I think it's about finding appropriate ways in which they can have their voices heard through forums like Politics in Action or the Youth Assembly and other forms of engagement. But I do think at this stage, for me personally, and what I've seen and what I've come through, I do believe that the voting age at 18 is an appropriate age for it to be at this stage.
Very well answered. Robbie, I think in 2011 your party actually passed a motion to lower it. I think it was 2011. But within the Assembly, it never actually got implemented into law, however, because that's a Westminster issue. But I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Okay, so my party policy is that votes at 16 would be something that we would do. I've talked a lot to young people about this issue over this last few years, and I'm just going to give a shout out to a number of youth organisations who were kind of birthed through COVID, which would reinforce the evidence that I think young people are more than capable of not just having good ideas, but actually creating some really good vehicles that bring about change. So I'm going to mention my personal favourite first, which is Pure Mental A&I. So that was birthed from two young guys who came into my office to talk about their priority, which was mental health. They've went on to create a young person's charity around mental health. They're doing some phenomenal work. And there's SSUNI, which I know some of you guys are aware of and are part of. Johnny has talked about the youth forums, the youth parliament and stuff. A kickback I got at the door one time from an older gentleman, and he raised the query of why is your party in favour of votes at 16, and I asked him, well, do you think the adults in the room are doing a good job at the moment with the return that we get in the Assembly? Because he was frustrated, and his answer was no. Well, I said, well, could the young people do any worse? I personally think they may help to change things. But certainly you will live a lot longer, you have a lot more years to go than someone my age, so you have every right to be speaking in. But on Johnny's point, Johnny's not necessarily wrong in terms of the thoughts behind it. I do think 16 is right, but it has to go hand in hand with an education piece. And that is the bit where at around age 14 to 16, there's a piece of education that goes with every student that would almost be your license to vote. So that would give you some context as to why you vote, how you vote, what your vote does, how that mechanism would work. So it's not just a blindsided yes. What it is yes, and we're going to make you the best voters ever because we're going to make Northern Ireland great again.
And Owen Tennyson, do you think it's time to lower the voting age?
Absolutely. It's a position that we've long held, that we support lowering the voting age. I believe we actually supported the motion in the Assembly back in 2011, and it's depressing that nothing has changed in that time. I think, like Emma, it's a simple principle. If you're old enough to pay taxes, you're old enough to have a stake and a say in how those taxes are spent and how public services are delivered and how society operates. And we often go down this rabbit hole when we talk about votes at 16, where it's a wee bit patronising. It's like a tap on the head for young people. It's like, oh, it's very complex, and yes, you have views, but it's not time just yet, or, well, you don't know enough about the history. And I reflect on many adults, and indeed some of them sitting in the assembly, who don't know very much about the complexity of politics and the history, if we're honest. So I don't think that's a good enough reason. I think there are lots of young people who are really engaged and really knowledgeable about politics and who have strong views about the direction they want society to take. And we only have to look at some of the activist movements. So the climate movement is being driven by young people. Young people are way ahead of where politicians are on that issue and understand the science and the issues better than a lot of us. Young people were involved in the People's Vote campaign during the Brexit referendum, which was really pivotal and really important, particularly here in Northern Ireland, on social issues and LGBT rights, on women's rights. Young people have so often been at the fore. Even within my own party, we actually don't have a lower age limit. So we have people who are 14, 15, 16, influencing our party policy and campaigning for the Alliance Party. Those people are capable of going out and voting. So absolutely, I think it's long past time that we had votes in 16 and that young people had a proper say and proper stake in politics and in society. If we complain that young people are disengaged or disinterested, then we know why. It's because we're not listening to them, and it's time that we started listening.
Excellent answer. I think we'll open up for another question. I think over here, just...
Hey, my name is Fadi. Thanks for everyone coming here. And I'm with Diverse Youth today. And I'd like to expand on that point about voting age at 16. Since it's not implemented yet, how would people from unheard communities, like, for example, asylum seekers, homeless people, and young people as well, how would they get their voices out there and heard by the politicians as yourselves?
Excellent question. Will we start off with Mr. Buckley?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably an extension. If this was a policy that was being pursued by particularly young people to engage with the organisations that are there, whether that's Politics in Action or indeed other political lobbyist groups or political parties on this issue, by engaging in that platform, you stand the greatest chance of affecting the change that you want to see. So I suppose probably I'm not the best person to answer that question, given my stated position on lowering the voting age. But if anybody wanted to involve themselves in any successful political campaign to achieve change, it's about pressing the right lobby groups and indeed political parties for them to incorporate that into their manifestos and into party policy.
And Owen, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really important point, and it's actually a timely point now that we're here today talking about the Good Friday Agreement. Because back in 1998, everything was seen through this kind of binary orange or green lens. I mean, even in the recent census, there was a question and it said, what religion are you? And if you ticked none, the next question was, but what religion were you raised in? And it's pretty much, okay, you say you're an atheist, but really are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist? And we see that all the time in Northern Ireland, and the people who are squeezed out in that kind of dialogue are minority groups, people of other religions, people of different ethnic backgrounds, the LGBT community, people with different needs who don't fit that binary kind of orange and green lens when it comes to our politics. And I think that's a challenge for us as politicians, to look at how we actually accurately reflect the diversity of our society. And part of that, from my perspective, is about how the institutions are set up and reforming the designation system to ensure that everybody has an equal say and an equal stake in the political institutions. But there's also a job of work for us to do, particularly on the asylum seeker and refugee issue, which I'm really passionate about, to lobby Westminster, because much of the policy is set there, and I think much of the policy over the past number of years has been really counterproductive and has been scapegoating refugees and asylum seekers for many of the problems that have been created by government. And I think it's incumbent on us, all as political leaders and politicians and civic leaders, to stand with marginalised communities and give voice to the concerns that they're raising with us. Because it's sometimes too easy when you're a politician to stay quiet whenever a controversial issue comes up, be it about asylum seekers and refugees, be it about trans rights. But leadership is about giving voice to those difficult issues and educating people about those issues. So I think it's something that we all need to reflect on and ensure that going forward, minority groups are properly protected and celebrated as part of the fabric and diversity of Northern Ireland.
Excellent answer. Cara, your thoughts on it?
Thank you so much for your question. I think for us in the STLP, you touched on it there, Owen, the importance of reaching out to marginalised groups, ethnic minorities, and I know a representative very well in the Derry City and Strabane Council called Lillian Sione Barr, and Lillian was a newcomer here, I think about 6 or 7 years ago, and she started a grassroots movement in the Northwest Migrants Forum. So it's essentially a space for to celebrate difference, to celebrate diversity, and to ensure that political representation out there across the Northwest is listening to the voices of ethnic minorities. And even recently I had a meeting about asylum seekers, young people under the age of 18 who come here without parents, and ensuring that we're doing everything we can in local government and listening to their stories and ensuring that we're getting the kind of reform in our policies that we need to ensure that they are given a voice. But absolutely, no, it's crucial that we have these conversations and we have the space in which to do so.
Excellent point. And Robbie?
Cheers. It's like watching out for charity collector, because I wasn't trying to get your eye to get talking here. I think Northern Ireland is a completely different place than it was in 1998. You can look around this room and it looks different. The gender level in here is totally different. The ethnicity is different, and it's brilliant. And as someone who is proudly unionist and wants Northern Ireland to succeed, I know, and I've kind of always known this, diversity is key to that, and recognising all of the minorities and promoting it. But it's always really useful to always have your eyes open and to be picking up on the cues of how other people live, how they perceive, how they get information. And I think back to my days in the fire service when we did the fire safety talks, and most of you, hopefully from P5, when you were in P5, there was a fire engine came to your school and you got a fire safety talk, and we did those in a couple of languages. We did them in English, we did them in Irish. But we didn't have them in other languages, so there are other languages that weren't recognised. And we know that the second most spoken language in Northern Ireland is actually Polish. I think there's something in around the region of 30,000 people here whose first or second language is Polish. So, for instance, in our statutory agency, does our fire service, for instance, give out that information not just in English and Irish, but also perhaps Polish, to help embed and make people from different communities feel part of the Northern Irish community, which I do believe is and will be the best community in the world. I'm going to give you one more wee personal example of where I've seen with my own eyes, and just in terms of the impact of where someone like me who's born here, who's white, who's Protestant, who grew up in what I believe to be a normal space. So I have a wee daughter now who's I have a few now actually, but a wee one, and she's 6 and she's mixed race, and she's a beautiful wee girl. But I remember her sitting down last year with a wee book. The wee book was full of princesses. She was turning the pages. And then she says, "Daddy, there's one that looks like me." She had to turn about 20 pages to find a black princess. The black was full of white princesses. And I think even to find, 10 years ago, when they were authoring the books and doing the artwork, there probably wouldn't have been a black princess in the blinking book. And when I got it, when I looked at it, I could have cried, because she was so proud. Of course, there should be a black princess in there. And in Northern Ireland, sometimes we're a wee bit slow to the hockey. The hockey's where you throw a dart from. That's old speak. So sometimes we're a wee bit slow to the starting block. But see, when we get to the starting block, we'll blow the socks off everybody. And I think hopefully there's a part of an answer to your question in there. Northern Ireland, for its next 25, 50, 100 years, needs to be the centre of diversity and inclusion. And I want to be part of that. Thank you.
And Emma, your thoughts?
Thanks. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously in terms of asylum seekers and refugees, we're under the British government's hostile environment policy, which probably is not helpful in terms of allowing people their enfranchisement, because they're excluded from society through that procedure. But one of the things, and it's been touched upon already, I mean, as a party, we would produce leaflets in other languages in order to try and reach out to newcomer communities and people from other countries who have settled in the north, and to get that engagement going, and sort of alerting people to our service and what we do, so that they can access us should they need help. But it's about getting out onto the ground and speaking to people and regardless of what minority grouping you're talking about, whether that be trans individuals, whether that be newcomer communities, younger people, whatever it is, you need to be out and speaking to people, and then you understand the issues, and then the onus is on us to advocate for those people and give those people a voice and speak about the issues that are affecting them. So I think that's the most effective way of ensuring that those people then get involved in the system and vote and play their part in democracy.
Very well answered. I can't remember if I came to you, Johnny, did I? You did, yes. All right, thank God. I look really bad now. I think we have time for one last question. I think we've one over here.
So this one is about the Northern Irish road racing, like around Northwest 200, Armagh, all those races. How can you ensure that the road racing will be protected so that it will run each year?
That's a brilliant question.
Is this? So I
think we do have to go for Cara on that one.
Thank you so much. That's a very local issue in my constituency. So I'm from Portrush, and I've had a number of meetings in the past year regarding the Northwest 200. Locally, it is absolutely adored and provides a number of opportunities, not only for our businesses, but also B&B owners and enthusiasts as well. I think for us, ultimately, we want to see the executive up and running. We want to see tourism in the North Coast and the wider Northwest being held as a priority. There is huge potential, and yet we continue to see instability with funding and assurances that year on year that we will continue to see the Northwest 200. And when we heard the news initially that it wasn't going to happen, I had a number of phone calls from constituents absolutely heartbroken. It's such a huge part of who we are in the North Coast. I have so many memories over the years of the Northwest 200, and I think ultimately what we'll be doing is in the SDLP is lobbying and doing all we can to get the executive back up and running. It's absolutely fundamental. It's key to prosperity for all of our people here, and that's what we'll be doing. I'm proudly from the North Coast, so anything I can do, I'll be doing it.
I'm afraid I have absolutely no fun facts about the Northwest 200, but Johnny, you seem to be primed and ready for that one.
No, I'm a huge Northwest fan, so I suppose what I'll say, guys, this is actually the real politics, so all politics is local. Remember that if you ever get involved. So in relation to the Northwest, it's not local to me, but it's part and parcel of our fabric. The Northwest 200 and indeed road racing in Northern Ireland is something that we should be so proud of. We lead the way. We've had huge superstars, particularly I think of the Dunlop family from the Northwest that have put Northern Ireland really on the map. And, you know, anybody that has attended the event will understand that actually people from around the world look in on Northern Ireland in the Northwest 200. So it's a real pillar of our economy. And I think what we need to do is try to change conversation surrounding the benefits of the Northwest, not only, yes, in terms of a sport, but also that wider tourism piece that it plays, not only in Northern Ireland, but in and connected throughout these islands. Its uniqueness is something that we should celebrate and also should bring with it additional funding. But core to that also is ensuring that we can supply the Northwest 200 and indeed others that organise road racing with the appropriate safety mechanisms to ensure we have the safest possible environment for those riders.
Very well answered as well. I think we'll go to Robbie next.
Thank you. You'll be well aware that the Northwest 200 is the second best road race in the world because the first best one is in Dundrod, which is just above where I live. No, all politics is local. But you know, this relates more towards tourism and Northern Ireland being the centre of excellence for many opportunities. So it's just right that a reformed executive should look at that as not just for the sport, because we have the fastest road races in the world. On that point, it was just been mentioned about safety. From my background in the fire service, I really want to see it so that it's made much safer for the participants and those that watch. But also there's the added opportunities of bringing the Euros here in a number of years. You've got the Open coming to Portrush, and we have a real jewel here in Northern Ireland and indeed on these islands to see this is a centre of excellence. So I don't think you'll have any dissenters here on the panel, but it is and it should be a priority, young man.
I think we'll go to Emma next. I'm not sure how much you know about road racing, but I'm impressed to see what you have to say.
Good man for the question. Again, not in my constituency, but when the news broke that Friday morning or Thursday night, I was inundated with constituents who go to the Northwest or participate and were devastated to hear that it was under threat. So would agree with what's already been said around, obviously we need to see an executive up and running, we need to see stability for that competition and for others, and allowing people to participate in sport in a safe way, regardless of what that sport is. We talked earlier about mental health and all of these things. Having that outlet is key for an awful lot of people. So I know, like, the town that I live in would have been, it would be sort of known for cruising, if people know what that is. And an awful lot of people were threatening that they were going to take the bikes out in the town street and start using it as their racetrack if the Northwest wasn't reinstated. So I would be vexed to see it been lost, definitely.
Again, I've never heard Owen Tennyson speak about road racing before, so I think we'll close with this one because this is one I'm dying to hear.
Yeah, well, politicians are often accused of not giving straight answers to straight questions. I'm going to be honest and admit I know absolutely nothing about road racing, just to be clear, but it does raise an important point because it's not the only sport that's been impacted. We're seeing delays in terms of funding for casement. We've seen other events be impacted, and it all comes back to this issue of political stability. I mean, this is our job, like answering questions like that and dealing with issues like that. That is what we as politicians are supposed to be doing. It's the bread and butter. And that's the job that we're currently not doing. So it's a question for everyone, I guess, in the audience to reflect on. And I'll leave you on this. I'll not bore you by trying to waffle my way through a question about road racing. But there are issues that I'm sure all of you could list that are impacting on your life or that you're passionate about that are being held up. And it's very, very easy to switch off and say, do you know what, politicians do nothing, they're all the same, I'm going to disengage, I'm not going to bother voting. But for those of you that are voting age or that are almost at voting age, register to vote and use your vote because your vote is your voice. So if you're frustrated about an issue, if you don't like a decision that any one of us in this panel takes and you want to send a message, send it at the ballot box, because if you're not engaged, if you're not voting, if you're not taking part, then you can't complain about the results that you get in the end.
That was brilliantly spun. I think that is all we have time for. I think another massive round of applause for our panel.
Hi guys, so this is the part where we thank you for coming and we thank all the really important people who came today. So as you can probably see, I have a big list in front of me. So first of all, we just like to thank Queen's. I think there's a couple of people at the back from Queen's for having us and for letting us have this event here and be part of the wider event. And second of all, I'll not name everybody, but I just like to thank everybody who was on the panels today. So that includes the local MLAs and the people who have travelled down to be here, and also to Dermot and Aoife for hosting them because they were incredible. Third of all, I'd like to thank the funders who very kindly provided the notebooks and the pens and the highlighters and hoodies and whatnot that you have gotten today. So first of all, EY, very important. And then after that, we have the International Fund for Ireland, the Ireland Fund, the National Lottery Community Fund, and the Reconciliation Fund. So a big thank you to all of them. So I can put my big list away now. So finally, I would just like to thank Paul for all the work he's done to get everybody here and organise this event, as well as everybody else involved in the Politics in Action team who has worked for so long, I don't even know how long, to allow you all to be here and host such a good event. I myself work in the tech industry and know that nobody ever thanks the technicians, so big thank you to Alan. And so the theme of today is what peace means to me, or what peace means to us. And instead of me giving you a big long speech about my opinions as an 18-year-old and all that, I thought it would be way better for us to hear from a student here, Jack, who will introduce himself in a minute, who wrote an incredible poem about the Good Friday Agreement and what that means to him. So handing it over to Jack.
Hello, I'm Jack. I'm from Loretto, Milford. In the land of Northern Ireland, a conflict that was quite dire, Protestants and Catholics couldn't seem to inspire. But then one fateful Good Friday, a pact was made so fair, a peace agreement that would end the violence and the scare. Politicians got together and agreed on a few things: power sharing, human rights, and paramilitary disarmaments. The people of Northern Ireland were overjoyed to see a future filled with harmony, a brighter destiny. But some still argue till this day if the agreement's truly sound, as the beginning of a new era, or just a bandage that's bound. Regardless of the criticisms, we can all agree that the Good Friday Agreement was a step towards harmony. So let's raise a pound of Guinness to the Irish and the Brits who put aside their differences for a future that uplifts.